Hello, everyone. It's so beautiful to see the house that full. It's our almost last talk, and we are extremely excited and tired and excited, and we are also super happy that two amazing filmmakers join us today. I always want to say tonight, but it's probably because I'm tired. For a conversation about filmmaking, about directing, about practices, but also about the friendship. They know each other well, so don't kind of get a shock if they also talk very, very, very frankly to each other. So please welcome Burhan Qurbani, Karim Aïnouz.
We're also very, very excited to have an alumna in the house. Paula Alamelu, producer, screenwriter, Talents Alumna 2016 and Talent Project Market 2018. Please give her a warm round of applause. She's hosting the session today.
Welcome to us. Lots of fun.
Hello, hello, hello. Now we're here. Thank you so much. I am thrilled and excited to be talking today to two fascinating directors who I admire very much. I'm sure you all are probably familiar with their work. I'm going to introduce them. Burhan Qurbani worked as a dramaturg and director's assistant in various theaters in Germany. While studying at the film school at Filmakademie Baden-Württemberg, his short films won several prizes, including the German Film Critics Award. His graduation film, Shahada, premiered in 2010 in Berlinale competition and won also a number of international prizes. Wir sind jung, wir sind stark opened the 2014 Rome Film Fest and the Hof International Film Festival. And in 2020, Berlin Alexanderplatz was selected for the Berlinale competition and won also several prizes, including the German Film Awards. And your latest feature, Burhan, Kein Tier so wild, No Beast so fierce, just premiered here at Berlinale this year. Please give me a big applause for him. And of course, Karim Aïnouz, also an award-winning filmmaker and visual artist. Your debut film, Madame Sata, premiered in Cannes, 2002. Since then, I'm not going to tell all of the films. You've realized over 10 feature films, most of them fiction, but also some documentary formats. You've won many awards. Most of the films premiered in Berlinale or Cannes. And amongst all the awards that you've received, also Uncertain Regards at Cannes in 2019 with the film Invisible Life. And you're also a screenwriter, tutor, a member of the Academy of Motion Pictures Arts and Science, aka the Oscars. And your latest feature, Motel Destino, also premiered at Cannes last year, 2024. So give me a big applause for Karim as well, please. We want to talk today about storytelling in times of dissonance. Karim and I were discussing before these days that times of dissonance sounds somewhat a bit of an euphemism, maybe, for the hard times that we're living in. So we want to have a candid but also honest conversation. These are hard times. I think most of us heard the opening speech from Tilda, and we want to name things by its name. I think we are all aware of the impending rise of fascism, of tech fascism, of new alt-rights, but we still We want to talk about film, and we want to talk about your work. We want to understand how you keep the courage to listen and to create films in these times of war and bad times, really. But I would like to start at the very beginning, and I would like to hear from you what brought you to film. What was the thing? Did you always knew you were going to do films? Did you always want to be a director? Was there something that inspired you to choose the medium of film to express your art? For both of you. You can choose.
Okay. Your story will be longer, so I'll make it short. I didn't want to go to film. I wanted to work in theater, and I was doing that right after my high school, and my brother wanted to go to film school. And we, at that time, we didn't have internet at home, so I printed out the application form for my brother, and my mother wrote it, and she said, read it, and she said, "Burhan, with all your experiences, you could also apply." And I was stupid enough to do it, and I was stupid enough to get into film school, because for many years my brother really hated me for that. And it took a while till, I mean, right now he's my best friend, he's my favorite human being in the world, and I kiss his eyes, but for a while it was really, really, really hard. And then I was doing film, and I was the youngest in my class, and I didn't know shit about film. And I had to learn everything every day. What is this lamp? What is this camera? How do you make a mise en scène? How do you create an image? Because for me, there was only the stage, the theater, and somehow now, after 2001, 20-something years, I'm back to theater somehow with my new movie.
Fantastic, thank you. Karim, do you want to share your story?
Yeah, I never wanted to do film, really. I never watched films. It was not something that was in my daily life. It was not something that was in my horizon at all. I come from a family that it was like not a question. I never understood really how films were made, you know, so it was not even wanting to make something that you don't know how they're made. And I've always loved painting and mathematics, and so I didn't study either of those. I studied architecture, which is sort of a mix of both. And then when I finished architecture, I really wanted to come back to what I really loved, which is painting, and I did. I got a master's degree to study architecture in the US. I'm from Brazil, somewhat from Brazil. And so when I got to New York, it was a very interesting moment in the world, because I realized I didn't really want to keep studying architecture. It felt like things took too long to get made. Little I knew that here I am. And then I started to go back to painting. Couldn't really make a living doing that. And I think it was also a moment in the world, you know, what's the AIDS epidemic, and a lot of people were dying, but a lot of people were getting together. And it was a moment in the city that there was a lot of independent films being made. And I was really lucky to, so I started sort of doing Super 8 as well, because I thought there was a way. I realized quickly that I had no talent as a painter. And then I started making Super 8 films, and photography was a way of substituting painting. And I saw a movie that really changed the way I thought about filmmaking, which is a movie that was made by Todd Haynes, who was the jury president this year. It was an incredible sort of essay about a pop singer called Karen Carpenter. She was part of this group called the Carpenters, and it was a really beautiful essay about feminism, patriarchy, and also there was something very moving about the film. And the great thing is a movie that was made with Barbie dolls. And I thought, well, maybe I can make this, you know, it's not so expensive, you know, it felt very handmade. So that's how I started. I started as his assistant at the time, and still not thinking that I would make films. But then I think the movies that were made at that time, particularly in the US, they really changed the world. They really changed the way we do things and things about things. We think about political as a was a great moment for political filmmaking, but also very sort of vigorous filmmaking. And that's how I got hooked. And then I made a short, and then I made another short, and then I dreamt of making a feature, and it took me about 10 years to make it, and then didn't stop.
And since then, you've
Trying
been...
to catch up with those 10 years, yeah.
Exactly, because since then you've been very prolific. We were discussing before that you're almost producing one film a year, which is a lot, obviously, as we know. We want to see a little bit of your work to give the audience a bit of visual material. We're going to start watching a trailer for your latest film, Karim, Motel Destino. So let's watch it and then, yeah. Thank you very much. Karim, you're talking about Todd Haynes and how you started in this time in the 80s doing these films. I don't know if someone saw the other day, there was also here a talk with Christine Vachon and Cheryl Dunay, who Christine Vachon is the producer that has produced, I think, all, if not almost, or almost all, if not all the films by Todd. And Christine was mentioning that in that time, these films that you're talking about, like, you know, kind of low budget, queer cinema, they worked really good because they had an audience that was very passionate about these films and that really were craving the representation and as you were saying, because these were political times with the AIDS crisis, they were really craving also, yeah, hope and representation basically of these films. I would love to know, who do you think is your audience? Who are you speaking to with your films? I'm starting with you, Karim, but I also want to hear from you, Burhan. Yeah, who's your audience? Who do you do the films for? And yeah, and do you feel like this audience is supportive of your work?
But I have almost no audience. Do you know my numbers?
But who do you have in mind? Tell us.
I don't have anybody specifically in mind. I used to have one. When I was still in film school, there was the secretary of the director of the school, Frau Mosselmann, Mrs. Mosselmann, and she was every time when we had like a test, she was always sitting in the first row, and you had the professors behind her, and of course the professors were like old, bitter filmmakers who are teaching and not doing films anymore. But Frau Mosselmann, Mrs. Mosselmann, she was like an honest audience. She was, in the best sense, a simple person who was just, she loved us as students, and she was proud of us that we were working, but she was also watching our movies as a real audience. So I remember during all those screenings over the years in the film school that I was not watching my professors, I was watching Frau Mosselmann. And when she liked the movie, I felt I've done something right. And unfortunately, she died before I could finish my studies in the film school. But somehow she is still watching the films, which is nice. It's more that I have to cut out some people out of my movies. For example, I can never imagine my mother or my father, because then I would stop making movies, because an Afghan Muslim family, my movies doesn't work. And I know that the subject matters that I have often like queer or like also critical with Islam or with my community, they don't like that so much. So I'm putting them out of my mind. And in the end, I think I'm floating with an amazing blissful ignorance until the moment of that I have to show it to people, mostly like you, like the first time here at Berlinale, for example, and then for the first time I see my audience, and then I'm, okay. And then, and that's the first time that I'm really confronted with it, and I have to also face my ignorance and get the feedback. And it's sometimes painful, sometimes amazing. Right now it's wonderful. We had a Q&A after our first film, after our first screening, and Robi, the guy who was doing the Q&A, he's from Lebanon, and my film is about the Arab community, and the first thing he said, your movie is about Palestine. And I was like, I had the feeling I had a gag in my mouth for 1.5 years. I was not allowed to talk, and I made a movie about the Arab community, which plays a lot about war, and then somebody says something like that as the first audience. That was like it was amazing, like to feel like I felt liberated in a way. But I also know that another part of the audience sees the film as a Shakespearean experiment, as a film, as a piece of film art or whatever. So my audience is invisible, and my movies belong to them and not to me anymore. And they can think and feel about it whatever they want, because I gave it to them, and I have no ownership on it anymore.
Mm-hmm.
It's an interesting question. And when I started to make films, it's funny to think about it now, because it was a time, you know, when you think of new queer cinema and what was happening, and also coming from a country like Brazil, I think cinema always has an impact on reality, and that's why I make it. Actually, to answer your question in a very flat way, I think it does have an impact, and a very forceful and beautiful and poetic impact on the real. But thinking about an audience, I think in the beginning I wasn't really thinking about an audience. It was almost like things that I needed to say to the world, and I wasn't really articulating it to whom. It was more about using the space of the screen and of the big screen to sort of have characters that were not in an audience, you know? Like, I think it was almost like trying to think who is not in the big screen and who needs to be celebrated and who is not necessarily sitting in a cinema. The film sort of starting being about that and about stories that I sort of missed, listening or hearing or watching. So it started almost like filling in blanks that for me were really important to fill. And then I think as the years passed, I think I started to think more and more now about audiences, and I think I'm very obsessed with that now, because I do think that the impact that I think we had like 20 years ago when we made films has changed dramatically, and I think the market has changed, you know, everything has changed. So I think there's very few, particularly in the last 2 years, it's really haunted me, the fact that I spent 2 years without having an audience, because even when you release a film, I'm talking on a very small scale, like even when you release a film, you have an exchange with an audience, and I think after the pandemic, it's really disappeared. So I don't know who is my audience, but I've been really excited about a few things that happened in my last films. I was just telling Burhan when I was coming here, I'm editing a film now, and we're actually doing test screenings with audiences, because I'm really interested, not necessarily like making films for an audience, but to understand how we're communicating, because I think it's such a powerful place and space and medium that I think I'm very curious now of how to, at least to not alienate them, you know? I think sometimes I have the feeling that some of the films I've made, I just needed to make them. So it was like shouting, you know? And now I do think that I can do that, but also I think it's really important to, especially in the times we're living, I have such faith in storytelling and in cinema. I think it is, I don't know, maybe it's the only tool and the only gun I have, you know, in the times we're living.
Mm-hmm. What I think is amazing about you is that you are so open for engaging with your audience, and that you really want to have their feedback. I think that I'm mostly afraid, because of this ignorance, I'm so afraid that too early somebody will pop my bubble, and I will have to face a certain reality. And I like so much that you really go for it, and you want to have the harshest comments, you want to have all the notes, and then you handle it, but you're facing it. I think that's amazing, because our work is so vulnerable at a certain point, but you are like with an open chest are going there.
Yeah, I think I've been hit so much. I've made a lot of movies, and I think I've been hit on the head with like machetes, you know, because of some films I've made, because things that I didn't need to, it's almost like also self-defense, because I think it's so important. There are things you don't see, there are things you don't understand, you know, you're just in the middle of something which is very, very subjective. And I think when you say this, it's also really great to actually know if there are questions of clarity and a bunch of other things that you know before you actually give birth to a movie, you know. So but I wouldn't say that I'm worried about, it's not like I don't care, but I have never made a movie which is sort of for a targeted audience. Mm-hmm. I think I would love to do one soon, because I think it's really exciting to test the limits, but it's not been in my journey so far.
Somebody flirting with Amazon.
Ooh. Dun, 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 dun. This is off record. Okay, I'm gonna ask you about your process of creative process, but first we're gonna watch the trailer from you, Burhan, from Cantia Zovil. This no Beast So Fierce, and I want to let you know this is not the official trailer, so you're in for a treat. Also, at the end of the trailer, we're gonna have a little peek behind the scenes. So let's watch it. I would love to know, where do you get your topics? Because I think it's very interesting what you just said, Karim, that we're living in times where film has changed. I feel like in times of like YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, we could almost even say that film is a bit bourgeois. Even who's going to the cinemas? And even if I think about pushing it, if I think about Cantia Zovil, Burhan, I mean it's you're dealing with Shakespeare, Richard III. And you've also, Karim, worked with UK royalty. You made a film, Brandfire, right, about Henry VI. So, I mean, Shakespeare, UK royalty, these are topics that I would consider quite, very Western, of course, and even, I would say quite bourgeois, even. So how do you come to these topics, and what's your creative process, and why?
I was just reading an amazing book by Ta-Nehisi Coates. He's an American journalist and civil rights activist, and he's a black American man, and he's addressing his son what it means to be a black person in the United States, how fragile the black body is. It's an amazing essay. It's really wonderful. But he also talks about how he is a black person, but I try to include me as a POC, how we try to replicate white Western narratives, white Western aesthetics, and so on, and he's talking about that we are looking for the he's looking for the African Homer, for the African Shakespeare, but he comes to the conclusion that the moment that we apply our ideas, ourself, our conflicts on those materials, we make Shakespeare, in his case, black or POC, in my case, Afghan or Muslim. When I take Homer and I take him for myself, it is my Homer. And so when I cope with different issues, and now I've done 4 movies, for the first time I can look on an oeuvre and I see that there's certain issues that are coming up over and over again, and I realize, for me, it's about strangers in a strange land. And this becomes like a filter. I'm sure you have the same when you talk about your stories. There's a certain filter, and you go through the world, you read books, you read articles in newspapers, you see movies, you listen to music, and everything goes through this filter, but there's one thing that really matches to you, to your heart, to what you want to say. And for me, it's the stranger in a strange land, because I feel I'm not only the child of Afghan parents, I'm also, even in my own community, I'm a stranger, I'm a bit of a freak or an alien. And so this is something that I always apply when I'm looking for a story.
I think on my case, it's a bit different, because I think what you mentioned, I made a movie 2 years ago, I think, maybe a bit more, about the English monarchy, the Tudors, 1548, I think. It's about an English queen and about an English king called Henry VIII. And I was invited to do this movie, I think in 2021, and it was really funny because when it's about the last days of this guy who's kind of a monster in British history, but also a hero. And the producer came to me and I said, "You gotta be kidding me. This is the wrong address, like I think it's not me." Because I'm not somebody who was at all interested in monarchy. I don't really know much about English history. And then she kept insisting, and I said, "Why?" And she said, "Because the main character in this film reminds me a lot, although she's a queen, she reminds me very much of the character that you've done before." And I thought there was like an interesting thought that we actually could travel culture, time, and space, and still be making portraits of characters that are somehow relevant to you. But I think more than that, I think on my case, in terms of that film in particular, I just thought it was really great coming from Brazil to be able to write and do a movie about the history of a colonial power like England. I thought there was it gave me a sense of revenge, and I love revenge. So, because I love justice. So I think it was really great. And I kept thinking, I'm half Algerian, my name is Karim, and I would never in my life be invited, and I dare you to do it, to make a movie about a French king or queen, you know, like never. So I thought it would be a really interesting position to talk about something which was also far away from me. I'm also kind of very doubtful about the question that you can only talk about what you know. I think you can contaminate things that you don't know, you know, with the place you come from. So that's how it happened. But I understand your question. I think it's also a question of how you tell it, and also a question of paradigm. It's interesting to answer your question, because last night I watched a movie of somebody who's going to be doing a masterclass, I think just after this, called Khalil Joseph, and I was blown away, because I think what he does is exactly, he is taking the sort of classic parameters of Western storytelling, not only Western, but he's sort of blowing them up, you know, and doing something which is very original. So I'm always between doing what I just said, you know, like taking something that's quite classic and bringing sort of a different perspective, but I'm also very interested in blowing up Shakespeare and doing something else, which is, so I think there is many possibilities, you know, and I think that it's always for me the question that I am allowed to talk about anything.
Mm-hmm. Bravo. I love that. You can clap if you want. No. I think
In the way I want it.
I think it's really fantastic. I think, Karim, I was listening to some interview that you gave, and you were saying, you know, there's been so many people from the global north telling stories about the global south, and then it's, you know, it's great. What you just said, like telling from the global south, telling a story of the global north, and yeah, and culturally appropriating Shakespeare or like anything that you want to talk about. That's really fantastic. How easy or hard is for you to then find, like that's the theory, but in the praxis, how easy is to find financing and you know, like we all know how hard it is to make films and to find the funding. How is it for you from your experience? Have things changed now that you have obviously like way more oeuvre that you look back to, as you just said, Burhan? How has been the process of finding the money to make your films? And the infrastructure and, you know, everything that goes along.
It's always hard, and I mean, I have to say I am privileged. I am lucky. I hit the ground running with my first movie, and of course, when your final thesis is in competition of Berlinale, the second film is at least possible. And the movies that I did afterwards were successful enough to help me to make the films. But especially right now, I think we have to think outside of the system. That's like in Germany, it's all public funding, 90% public funding, even more. And I think it kind of distorts the stories that we want to tell. And I think especially in these political times, what happens if in these elections in Germany, the politics will change in a way that public funding will be difficult for certain people, queer people, people with migration stories, with war experiences, and so on and so on. And what I'm thinking for a year now, first of all, because I hate the way how we fund films, and that film is so expensive and that we have no other way to do it. But I'm thinking about new strategies of storytelling, which basically just means we have to tell better stories, but also we have to find new ways of shooting movies, so that we can be independent from state institutions or rich people who will tell us what is good and what is bad. And I mean, actually, this would be a great space to discuss exactly that. What can we do? The only thing I can say is that in Germany we have, I think, around 200 million euros in funding every year for films and for media and so on. That's a lot of money. In some countries, you have like smaller countries, you have like 10, maybe 5 million euros or dollars or whatever. And so they have to find much more creative ways to tell stories, much more international stories that expand over their own market. I haven't found a solution yet, but I think we have to look, if we want to use film as an anti-fascist, as a democratic tool, we have to find a way to make ourselves independent from authorities and states that are getting more and more authoritarian. Sorry.
Agree. Yeah. Can I answer really quickly to what you said? Because I think it's very, I mean, everything you said, as you got the applause, is very important. I'm wondering, I'm thinking about going also to, but I still want to hear your answer, Karim, but going to the point of aesthetics, because the less money we have, obviously we have different resources to then create our opera. Like, it really depends. I mean, if you have 100,000 or €1,000,000, it makes a difference on what are you going to be able to do aesthetically, you know? It doesn't mean that the film is going to be better or worse, but it means a film like Cantias of Ild, for example, I mean, with this epic, it's impossible.
But on the other hand, you know, what fucks me up is that there is a certain aesthetic of the elite that we have to follow if you want to talk about certain issues. If you talk about migration or people who are in socially bad positions, it has to be a certain aesthetic. And a movie as, really, my movie is very handsome, as mine about a minority with war experience doesn't seem to fit in a certain idea of, I think, imperialistic colonial way of filmmaking. But you are right, we need money to make beautiful stuff. Or we need collaboration, or we need solidarity, or we need to find ways to work together. When I started to make movies in 2001, 2002, a digital camera cost like €3,000, and it was still a crappy quality. Nowadays, it's much more democratized. But the problem is not the aesthetics, the problem is the stories. And in this country, I have the feeling that, guys, we have so much to talk about, but we don't. And filmmaking is still a privilege of kids of the upper middle class or of the middle class, and those stories need to be a bit mixed up more, you know. And the kids that I'm not going to make enemies now. Yeah. What do you want to say, Karim? Say it.
Karim, yeah.
So the question was about financing, right?
Yeah, how do you finance your films? And yeah.
You get good producers. I don't know how to finance, so I think it's about the collaboration with the producer that I think it's really important. So I realized that when I started to make films that I couldn't do it. It was just not my craft. So I think it's about that collaboration, and I think it's about producers that really support your vision. And so I think it's the first thing. I do think also two things I've learned, and I think I'm very privileged for it, is that I think good films don't need to cost a lot, but normally it's great when they can have a lot of money. I normally joke with my producers whenever they come and I say, this is not embroidery, you know, like it takes a lot of people, it takes a lot of effort, it's technologically, it's super complicated. So I am very much for independent cinema and low budget films. I've done films with an iPhone, but I also love to make films with a lot of money, because I think normally, not necessarily, you do reach a larger audience, especially these days where spectacle is something that anybody can do. So I think it's important, and you don't need to have a lot of money, but I think it's always good that you have the right amount that you need to tell a story. But I think more than all of this, and I also think that I can do, as I said before, I can tell different stories and from different places, and I think every movie has its price and its budget. But I also think it's super important to talk about here, since it's the talent campus, to also talk about how you get the films seen, you know, because I think that's, I think we live in a moment in history that we can make films with different kinds of money. My fear is, how do you get them across, you know? And I think that's, for me, the biggest question. And the last thing I want to say is, I never expect to say everything I want to say in the movie, especially if they're expensive. If I say 50% of what I want to say, I'm super happy. So maybe I'm copying out, but I do think it's, for me, like it's a medium that you do need to somehow, you know, it is the price of it.
I was calling you in the summer, and I had, I'm not sure if if this is the appropriate place to talk about it, but I had some problems with the people who were producing my films. Some are amazing, some not. And I was calling you, and I was in distress, and I was like, fuck, they want me to destroy the movie, and I just don't know like how to fight, you know, the financial power that they have. And you were saying, Burhan, it's just a movie, relax. For me, it's not, of course, because I produce one film every 5 years, and I put my everything in there. But I think that was the moment where I started to decide I'd rather make a movie that looks like shit and doesn't cost much, and I can express myself and I can be faithful to myself, than to have all the money in the world, but not to have a voice in my own film. And I see it with, I'm sure that because you're a fucking strong personality and and you can fight for it, but I see so many of my colleagues who go to the US or to other places and who have a lot of money backing their films, and then suddenly they're not in the editing room anymore. And then they're supposed to go to the premiere and bow and say how wonderful the work is, but they had no thing, like it's not their expression anymore, and that's heartbreaking, especially when like us, we are defined by our movies, you know, it's our personality, and.
But I think it's important to do both.
I know,
I think that it's part of the game. What I want to say is sometimes somebody comes to me and says, "Oh, this day of shooting was so hard, you know, and we always have 2 weeks less. Like when you're doing a feature, it's like you want 10 weeks, you have 8." I think that's just the nature of this, you know, like it is violent and it is brilliant and it is powerful and it is amazing. So I like the tension of needing 10 weeks and having 8. I think that energy, it's something that really turns me on. And I think that cinema is like this, you know. I think, again, it's not embroidery, and I think it costs money, and I think you never have enough, and I think there's always a struggle, but I think we need to embrace this, because otherwise it's as I told you, and I always remember when I'm making a movie, it's like, it's just a movie. I'm not saving anyone's life, you know, so let's go to a certain point, but I think it's also a medium that you need to love stress, and I think you need to love tension, and you need to love, like, you never have enough, you know, and I think that needs to be a source of joy in the process, then a source of frustration. And it is great, you know, and it is great to be able to have control, but at the same time, there's a negotiation that one needs to make, you know, to have your own voice, but it is very violent. So, yeah.
I think one thing that it's very interesting between you two guys is that you do have kind of like a very different, I want to say, vibe to your filmmaking in terms of the gemüt, in the terms of like the feelings maybe that you're right now sharing with us, and I would love to explore that a little bit more. I think Burhan, you just expressed like how, you know, how frustrating, like how it feels like life or death, maybe, no? You said my films are my personality, my identity, and I think one thing that really resonated with me also that you said on socials was that also influenced by your migrant background, that doing things never feels like you never feel a sense of completion, of joy, but it always feels like if you do well, it's more of a relief. I think it's what you said, and what you're telling us, Karim, right now is it's exactly it's more joyful, and I would love to understand like how I think these two things are not incompatible, because I resonate with both actually. I would love to hear from the audience later what you think. Yeah, would you want to comment on that?
I'm just afraid that later people will say, so Karim was really funny, and Burhan was like,
I'm sure a lot of people in the audience can resonate with both situations. I think one doesn't exclude the other. I think we've all in filmmaking experienced the joy, but also the frustration, right? So where do you get the joy, and how do you deal with the frustration, maybe, Burhan?
I get the joy that, you know, whenever I wake up and I think that I'm paying my rent making films, I think it's just fucking amazing. Do you know what I mean? Like, I can't believe it. It's like... Do you know what I mean? Like, it is just like the world does not need it. Do you know what I mean? Like, it is just incredible. It really doesn't, you know, like it needs other things. It's great to have it. And so when you think that you can, you know, pay rent and, you know, and make a living So whenever there's something bad, that's where I go back to, you know, like and I never thought I would be doing this in my entire life. I thought this is like a privilege life, and I think that I'm paid to play like a child. That's what we do as filmmakers, you know what I mean? Like we're playing, we're making believe, and I think I get every time there's a problem, this is a privilege, this is great, and I'm able to, and I think the other thing that I really like about making lots of films, I think, yes, I am a hungry child in the sense that I spent like so long trying to make my first feature that now I just want to eat the world making films. And I think that what's great about that for me too as well is like there's a movie that, you know, it's not like I don't do them with care and love, but I think for the sake of always being making films, you know, I think I have a rhythm that I managed to kind of get together in the last few years. You know, like, it's never perfect. It's fine, you know, it's gonna be great, I'm gonna do everything I have. So I think the source of joy comes precisely from this place in the world that I think, yeah, it's super painful. It's, sometimes you think like, oh my God, this is the end, but then you really have to think it's just a movie. And it is a privilege, you know, to be sitting here with what's happening in the world. Hello? So I think it's really important. That's how I get my drive.
I think it's amazing that this is actually like Eros and Thanatos sitting on stage, like the lust for life and the wish for death. So I'm going to stay with the Thanatos. I just remembered there was one moment in film school, and I was looking for, it was a short film, and I was looking for a producer. And there was Lydia, this Ukrainian producer, and we sat together and we got drunk. And in the end, she asked, like, why do you want to make this movie? And I said, I gave her like the answer that I would normally give, like, blah, blah, this theme is very important. No, why do you want to make this movie? And I went a bit deeper and I tried to explain the aesthetics and that it's something that's very important to me. No, why do you want to make this movie? And at a certain point, there was so much pressure, and I said, because I'm so angry and I want them to feel it. And I think that what you were referring to is, there was an Asian American tennis player. She was the first Asian woman to be #1 in the ATP ranking, and she had a very public breakdown where in a press conference she said, you know, when I win, I'm never happy, I'm just relieved that I didn't fuck it up. And that's not normal. And when I lose, I feel terrible. And I could relate to that so strongly, that I have to feel the expectations that I have on myself and my work. Especially in a society where, with a certain face, with a certain appearance, you have to be better than the average, just to be seen as okay. And I think that is a bit of the anger that I have in me, and that I also express in my films. This film especially is super angry, and there is a monologue where, in the end, where she says, I am the anger, I am the shame. You don't want to look at me, you don't want to see me, you put lies around me, but I am here, but I'm not your opposite, and I'm not a beast. And by saying, like, not an animal, and by saying that, she says, as an Arab woman, I am here, and I'm lonely, but I'm a human being, I want to be seen, and I have a right for being here, for having a home, and so on and so on. And so this is a struggle that I have, and of course, I'm trying to express.
No,
that.
I hear it, and I think it's interesting because I love anger. I think it's it's not hate. Don't get me wrong here. I think anger, in the sense of indignation, I think it's a really important energy, and it gives you a sense of urgency that I think and it's very interesting. When I made my first feature film, I never understood it, why I had chosen that character to make a movie about, and why I was so determined to make that film. And I think editing the film I understood, and I think it's in the dialogue even of the movie. It's about anger and injustice, and how injustice generates anger and generates a huge sense of indignation. But I think what's happened to me as I start, anger is always there, and I cherish it because I think it's a great motor, but do it but also blink your eye while you do it. You know what I mean? Like, I think it's like how to navigate that energy, which I think it's an incredible energy, and I think it's in your sense of humor, which is super joyful. It's in lots of things that you do, but I think it's good to keep it, because I think it's otherwise makes no sense. So I think you're absolutely right in that sense.
You helped me to understand Fassbinder. You know, you said his movies, all of them, are about loneliness. You know, and I think that every director, every writer, every creative person has a right to have this one theme that goes through their life, this one kind of pulsing energy that helps them to make negative things into positive things, into beautiful things, and especially in Motel Destino, it's all about loneliness, and you're a joyful person. It should not be your movie, but it is, because that's also part of your personality.
We're gonna open to questions from the audience now. So if you have your, oh, that was very fast. Okay, we already have a question over here. I still have a few questions, but I'm gonna allow for the audience to take the space. We have 2 microphones that are here, so that we have already one. While the microphone comes to you, I'm gonna ask you one more question, and the rest you can think about your questions. Karim, you just said, you know, that film is just a film. The world doesn't need it. It's not gonna save lives. But at the same time, we all agree, and I think most of us agree, that film does change lives. Maybe it doesn't necessarily save specific lives, but it changes lives, and maybe in a metaphorical way, it can save lives. And I think you both, I mean, are obviously very passionate about your work, and you do believe in the impact.
Today a DJ saved my life.
Exactly. Today a film saved my life. And you do believe in the impact, and the political impact of film. Exactly, as we were saying, in this time. So what do you want to be the
Of course
impact?
I do. What I meant by that is that sometimes when we're talking about the suffering of making a movie, I think that I didn't mean to say that, you know, it's just a movie. Yeah, I mean, we need to put it into perspective. I think that, you know, it is a very privileged Western medium of expression. So let's just begin it like that. So I always think it's good to put into perspective. But obviously, I believe that it's a tool for change, and I think that's when you ask me why I make movies, is because I do think they can change the world. But I think it's also important when you are in this industry, sometimes there is so much stress. What I was saying is that there's so much stress and there's so much conflict that sometimes you lose perspective, and I think a movie shouldn't bear the burden of that pain, you know. And I think so I'm not saying that it was just a movie, whatever, you know, otherwise I wouldn't be sitting here, but I think it's also important to put it into perspective, that it is, whenever, what I'm trying to say, particularly for young people, sometimes you enter into this tunnel of like, oh, it's really hard, you know, and, you know, everything's hard, and I think it's just, but it's also fun. That's what I meant by it, but I do believe that it is, and I repeat something I said in the beginning, I think in the world that we live in now, it's perhaps one of the most powerful mediums in history, because it doesn't go here, it goes here. Mm-hmm. It's like music goes here, you know. So I think it is something that it's really powerful in that sense. So it was just in the context of making films, because sometimes I think it's made to be the hardest thing in the world, and building a bridge, I think it's much more complicated.
We had a question here. Did you get a microphone? Could we get a microphone in the front? Can you raise your hand? Maybe that would help. Yeah, perfect. Thanks.
Hi, thank you for being here, first of all. But I don't know what I'm going to say is a question, but I really think I have to talk about it, because I want to point out something about the film Kind Tears So Wild. Because, I don't know, because I'm very nervous now, because I'm talking about my frustration while watching that film. Because, how could I say, you were kind of reinterpret the white British history, Richard III, from your ethnic perspective. But from my perspective as an Asian female, I felt, because in this film, one character is Asian female, appears like nail technician, very stereotype for Asian female, and there is no lines at all. and like she was just very terrified by the film protagonist. So because I see kind of the pattern when I watching some like film from Hollywood and not like Asian like film production, because like sometimes like Asian female character like just props, like no lines and no consequences, no really story in that. So, and also like being submissive and not talking at all is, for me, because I'm studying here in Germany, Kunstakademie Düsseldorf, I'm also making film, but not in the film school, but art school. So there's a kind of stereotype I always like fought against, like to overcome. So that's the kind of thing I want to talk about. I don't know, you guys have seen the Bombshell 2017 film, and in that film also this kind of pattern is repetitive, like because that film is really about empowerment of female and like sexual assault against women. But even in that film, there's a white journalist, the female journalists, they're really struggling from like prejudice and like violence against them. But in that film, one like Asian, like Chinese, I assume, nanny appears, and she just takes care of white woman's child. And so this is kind of, for me, it's just, yeah, the film is about diversity and about female as women feminism, but not you. This is like, for me, it's a slap in the face like that. So that's the reason why I felt a kind of same frustration while watching that film. This is, yeah, this film is about gender reverse and overcome very conventional gender role and in the Berlin dystopian underworld. But yeah, still Asian character is a very stereotype, being submissive, not talking at all. Yeah, that's just what I wanted to talk about.
And thank you so much for sharing your experience. I think one of the great films
listening.
about being in this festival is being able to get so different perspectives and really look in the in the spaces that we might have not looked. Because, like, of course, we're all just humans, and we don't, you know, with our films we can only cover what is in our hands, and then there's always going to be blinda Fleck. How do you say blinda Fleck in English?
Blind spot.
Blind spots in everything that we do. So thank you so much for sharing your perspective. I think that's very enriching to the conversation.
But also, I'm sorry if that scene in this film offended you. This movie is very much about power and about power that is bound, that is not bound by any kind of control, and how we repeat certain power structures, especially in that scene. A bit later, the main character is like confronted with their love interest and says, "You are exactly like my husband, who was violent, who was suppressing, and so on." So she basically, sorry, make it very quickly, and we can talk later. I promise we can talk later. But she says, "You are exactly like my husband." So you became the same power that you repeating the same power structure of suppression and of putting people in certain places. And I think this scene has a lot to do with that. But also, this the Asian lady was the main character in my not the last movie, but the movie before, where it's all about the Asian community and how they were persecuted, running into in a refugee shelter in Rostock-Lichtenhagen, which was burned down by neo-Nazis. So I'm sorry that this was my blind spot. I'm sorry if it hurt you. It's very much a theoretical thought about the repetition of power, or how power corrupts, and that we fall into the same places, even if we have like a different background. But we can talk outside, of course. And I'm sorry it made you angry. It was not intended.
We have another question there.
Hello, thank you so much for doing this. It's very inspiring. My question is about referencing to what Burhan said about many people giving much money, and all people having, of course, then opinions who give money in these structures. And Karim, you do independent films, but also big Jude Law starring Hollywood films, like how, or UK films in that case, but how do you bring the energy of independent filmmaking to big sets with larger budgets where many people could interfere?
Thank you for your question. I think it's really great. I think the reason I'm also grateful for where I am in life is also that I'm very privileged in the sense of having two bosses. I have a source of funding, which is Europe and Latin America, and I think it's very different, than when you have something which is hard money that goes into your movie. And I love to do both. I think there are different challenges, and I think there are different sort of ways of inventing yourself in both spaces. So I'm very happy to do that. And I think to answer your question, I do think, it's funny, when I started making films 20 years ago, I had an agent in LA, and he was a great guy. And like, I just didn't feel that, I just felt like if I just needed to have my handwriting correct. I needed to find like, how is my handwriting in order to be able to rent it to someone else or to apply it in a different context. And I actually quit that agent, and I said, I need to sort of I have to know what I want to do and how I want to do it. So 20 years later, I sort of got into that system again. And I think all I'm trying to say is, whenever I do, let's say, a Hollywood movie or something which is financed differently than doing films in spaces where you work with soft money, I just try to be the same person, like it doesn't matter where I am. So for example, when I made this film you mentioned with Jude Law and other great actors, for me the big thing was, when I make films in my own environment, it has been so far that there is somebody here who's actually a great partner, Nina, who is in the talent lab, and she was very much part of this process in Visible Life. I like to rehearse. I need to know my actors. But then, when you work in a system that you can pay your actors per month, it's one thing. When you work in a system that you have to pay your actor per day. But for example, I never accept to give you a very concrete example on Firebrand, if you want to be in that movie, you have to work for 2 weeks with me before for the same rate. Or if it's a different rate, I don't even need to know that. That's a conversation with the producer. But like, I think it's navigating different spaces with the same accent, if you know what I mean. So I think it's always about also navigating the other way around. When you make an independent film in a situation like Brazil or even Germany, where the funding system is very, very different, I think you always also bring something from that other experience. So I think it's understanding how to navigate different spaces, but also, as a director or as a writer, you have your own method, you have your own way, you have your own process. So for me, it's more than anything to not violate that process, to be able to be in an environment, and that's why I go back to the question of a producer, because it is about that relationship and about, that safe space that you can actually do what you do the way you know how to do it.
Do we have more questions? Yeah, here in the front. Or, sorry, in the back also, I didn't see. Excuse me. I think the person in the back was first, maybe, and then you.
Hello. My question is, any advice you have on working with your director of photography most effectively, especially if it's been the first time?
That's such a sweet question. Yeah. I think it's perhaps the closest collaboration you have on a movie set, right? I mean, it depends on how we work. So I think, as anything, I guess comes back to that other question. It's trust. Like, you need to trust them, and you need. I think I'll give you a tip. I think the tip is, you prepare a scene and you decide where the camera is, and you ask the person. It's never like this because you do preparation and you know what the person is before, but like, it's almost testing if your eyes are alike. So I normally say, can you do this? And then I go like somewhere like, I go talk to someone, or get a cup of coffee, or I talk to an actor. And then you come back and you look at the frame, and I think there's a sense of a kindred spirit there that I think you realize if you are in sort of a close collaboration. And I also think the second thing is, it's like making love. Do you know what I mean? Like, you're there, and there's somebody behind the camera, somebody in front of the camera, and there's you. It needs to groove. So I think it sounds like a very kind of crazy way to put this around, but I think it's really about that intuition of that you're doing a dance together, and I think you need to trust that person, but also I think you need to be challenged by that person?
Okay. I've been working with the same person for all my movies, even my short movies, and actually after every shoot we end up screaming at each other and hating each other. And every time I'm going basically like on Film Tinder and try to find a new date. And I realize when I meet other DOPs, they're not asking the right questions. They're asking about what's your style, what do you want to express, like how you want the mise en scène to look like. But the right question is, who's the character, and what does she want? What is how does she look from the inside? Where's the character going to? What is the story really about? Is there another level that I, with the camera, can support? You know, and when you found that person, then it's worth all the fighting, because then you have taking the sex metaphor. We have amazing breakup sex and amazing hookup sex again. And yeah, but you're right. It's a very intimate relationship. And I wanted to say one more joke. What is the difference? What is like when I look at my cameraman? This joke is really part of his personality. What is the difference between God and a DOP? God knows he's not a DOP.
Thank you. We have a question over here.
Thank you very much. My question will be about time, because I believe everything what connected to the cinema, it's everything about time. So it's time of the director's life, it's time of the working process on film, it's time of the film itself, and it's time of the people who will watch this film. So everything about time. So my question is, has your sense of time changed with the rapidly changing political situation in the world? And has it affected your working methods?
That's a good question.
I don't know how to answer that question. I don't really know. Yeah, I don't know how to answer that question.
Maybe the question, or if I understand it right, it's also like, do you have a more sense of urgency now? Like, do you make, right? Like,
death?
Yeah, yeah.
No, baby, no. No, I don't
No,
feel
baby.
Death. No. I feel, no, I'm really like, no, I think, listen, I feel the same. I feel it's always been urgent, like, you know, for me, depending where you come from, I think the only reason to make film, like, you said something quite interesting there. What is it that makes you, you know, when you make, for me the question is, when you make a movie, you must need to make a movie. Want to make a movie is not enough, you know, like it just falls apart. So I think that need and that urgency is always there, but no, I'm like, no death. I'm like all about life, and I think that we're not close to death. And it's funny when we're talking about this panel, there was a time of dissonance, and I said, there is no time of dissonance, babe, there's a time of hope. Like, I have to say that after the motherfucker was elected in the US, let's say no names, you know, I think that all my projects became more urgent, and they became necessary, and they really became something that I needed to make. And all the ones that were not urgent just fell apart, you know. So I think there is a sense of urgency, yes, but I think that sense of urgency is, for me, not linked with death, it's linked with survival. But that's very personal.
And I would say yes, and yes. If not now, when then? And if not we, who will do it? And I have the feeling that, you know, as a civil society, we are losing. We are losing, you know. And we have to be, we have to come together now, or they will take it away. Our freedoms, they will take our voices and our possibilities. So we have to fight now. It starts with an election, but it's also our expressions. And we have to be loud, and we have to be also uncomfortable, because minorities that were fighting for their rights were always uncomfortable, and especially to people like us, they say like, be quiet, don't be too loud, don't be, you know, don't be. And no, yes, we have to be loud and we have to be express ourselves. And I want to say something more theoretical. For me, it's not time; it's rhythm. For me, film is all about rhythm, and the policy is also rhythm. Like you have tension and release, and I think everything in what we do as filmmakers is tension and release. The way we edit, the way we work with our actors, the way we work with music and other stuff, but also in history. Right now, we're in a moment of tension, and I hope that there will be a moment of relief, but I think we have to act accordingly in this tension, especially coming from this country, knowing of so many artists who at a certain point had to leave and didn't come back, not only because they didn't want to come back, but because they decided, if I cannot work in my country, in my language, if my books are burned, if my films are forbidden, then there's only one way.
Hope and death. I'm gonna have one more question from the audience. Yeah, over there. And then I would like to have like the last piece of advice that you're gonna give to the young filmmakers for the political filmmaking. But let's have one more questions from the audience.
Hello, thank you for being here and sharing your insights. I have a very practical question. It's about rehearsal. I'm a director. How do you rehearse? Do you apply it, like, do you change for every project? Do you rehearse scenes? Do you do improvisation? It's very hands-on, I just need help.
Great question, very concrete. I love rehearsing, and as I said before, like I think one of the biggest difficulties in working in sort of different levels of budget is exactly that, because I think it's about time, you know, like time of rehearsal. And so the way we normally do it, and I think you should definitely talk to Nina after we finish this panel. She should be giving a master class, because she's been like working with me for a long time, and we've been sort of developing a lot of things together. Listen, the way I do it is like this, right? So there's the script, and so I think there is a moment that we read the script, you know, on a table, and that we discuss the script, and you go through all the questions and doubts and so on. And then I think there's the moment of experimenting with the scene. And so I normally, just to make this short, like I'm not in the room. I'm in the room, but somewhere in a blind spot. And I ask the actors to play the scene. And sometimes it's really good to, after you do that, to go back to what's before the scene, you know, like what's just happened before you did that scene, what's just happened before that happened. And I think it's also a question of discussing and experimenting and exercising with character, which is before rehearsal. So I think it's important that the actor has, you know, sort of, that they own their character. And then we go back and rehearse again. And I improvise in terms of spatial movement, but the more I make films, the less I'm interested in improvising on set. I'm really interested in keeping the lines there, but keeping them alive, you know? And they don't need to be the exact same lines that were on the script. They can be lines that can be rewritten or that can be reshaped on a rehearsal process. But I think on the shooting, I think it's really, for me, the more I stick to the lines, happy I am with the material. So, but I do all of this literally before the shoot, you know? So that's why I have this rule, like, if I could, I would do 4 weeks, and if I could not, I normally do at least 2 weeks, and I go through all the scenes of the film. And I think there's also a moment that you need to stop, because then it starts to sort of freeze, and people need, you know, maybe they know too much. And so I think it's keeping this kind of, still keeping the mystery, but having an ownership of the space and of movement. And it's changed a lot. I think like this is not something that I've always done like this. Every movie I do it slightly different, but I think it's kind of the basics. That's how I play.
Thank you for sharing.
I have mostly like between 4 days or maybe 1.5 weeks of rehearsal, so that's not a lot of time. And so we have to do our homework. What I always start with is the casting process is rehearsal process. You use the casting as much as you can to try difficult scenes, try difficult moments, try make experiments, because you also want to see like how agile are your actors, so you can just use those 1.5 hours that you have with one actor to go everywhere. And then when you made a decision for each other, that's almost 60% of the work is done, because then this person is the character. And when you go on writing, you also start to write for this specific actor or actress. And what I work a lot with is I always write together with the actress a biography for the character, always 3 generations, at least 3 pages. So the grandparents, the parents, and the character, because I always feel that trauma is trauma is trauma. Yes, Burhan, trauma, yes, it's me. And that helps. And then I work a lot with music. A Spotify playlist that we put together, and then on set and during the filming we listen to it and we refer to certain songs. And sometimes that's much easier than to go to some theoretical place. And it gives us some kind of isolation in this hurly-burly of a shoot, when everything is going crazy and you have the headphones and you can say listen to song number 5 from that playlist, stay there, stay there, stay there, and action.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for giving us such a wide range of wisdom. We've talked about very theoretical things today, but also very practical things. I think that's great. I think for the ending, would you like to share like a last piece of advice or encouragement or something for the young filmmakers that are, that have to fight their way and do their film? Something that you would like to share as a piece of advice?
My second movie, I was invited to the Jerusalem Film Lab. And it sounds a bit weird for me when I think about the time when that was possible, to go for 10 months to Israel and to, as an Afghan descending Muslim man and working in this environment, in the Holy Land, in the Holy City. And I remember the first day when we were sitting there together, and the director of the lab said, do you know why you're here? Because you make films that have to be done, So I would always ask myself, and maybe you yourself as filmmakers, do I make something that has to be done? And if yes, then you have to do it.
I absolutely agree.
Wow, finally we agree.
Now you agree?
Death and hope united.
I absolutely agree. I think that you need to do it, and you need to be the only one who can do it, because otherwise we enter the world of the generics, and I think that's the worst thing about filmmakers spending money and energy to do something that anyone could do. So I always come from this opinion that that's the first advice, and you're absolutely right about it. It's like, I think it's important to ask yourself the question, like, do you want to do it or you need to do it? And that's about urgency. And then the second question is, can someone else do it beside me, and how would they do it? Like, am I the right person to do this? And I think 2 very simple things. It looks like a self-help class, but like, you need to be stubborn and super patient at the same time. So it's like navigating these 2 emotions. I think it's something that, but I think you can do it. If you need to do something, you navigate stubbornness and emotion with grace. Voila.
Great final word. Thank you so much.
And thank you to Paola.
Thank you. And thank you to the audience. Thank you so much. Thank you to Talent. Thank you for being here, and enjoy the next days of Berlinale.
And thank you, Berlinale.
Yes, thank you, the audience. Thank you, everyone. Bravo.